Hello. Hello. We've just been having a very thorough chat about the decks. We've been excited for what's about to come up. My name is Mike, and I'm here, joined by Barish. And we're going to be going into the next match, which I'm very excited for because it's one of my favourite players. It's going to be Joe versus a local, which I believe it's pronounced Piotr, but it might be Peter. We're still not sure. Yeah. But some local Polish players. Are you excited for this match?
Absolutely, absolutely. Going into this tournament, I was asking the question, what is the one Pokemon to watch out for? Like, we will be having Silver Tempest coming up next, so this is really the last tournament with Lost Origin. And one main card is that Giratina. So I was really excited to see Giratina actually played out. We haven't seen it being featured in the first two rounds, but now Joe coming over to Warsaw and bringing his Arceus Giratina attack.
Yeah, and in an interesting deck, not the typical Lost Zone style. It's going to be paired with Arceus. Definitely one of the less commonly used decks in the current Lost Origin meta. But Joe is one of those players who studies the game, puts out loads of content, tries out all these different decks, and he will be coming in confident that this is the deck for the format. Obviously, the Flying Pikachu, that's an interesting addition. And we were just looking at the matchup before we came on camera there, and we think this could be relevant in this matchup.
Absolutely, absolutely. Like, Flying Pikachu had two advantages. One, it was actually seen in the World's Finals. And Flying Pikachu is very great against the Palkia decks with their Lightning weakness. But on top of that, the Flying Pikachu VMAX also prevents basic Pokemon from attacking.
Yeah, that secondary text is so key here. If we can see the bench be controlled well by Joe, then there's a chance that Flying Pikachu can wall out for the rest of the game. And the only option then against Lost Box, which is what Piotr's playing, would be Sableye damage. And that's just not going to keep up with the rhythm of that Pikachu. So it's something to think about going into this. And there's lots of other little cards which we'll see throughout the game, I'm sure. But this is third round here. We're in Warsaw, by the way. This is an exciting location for a lot of players, mainly because it's the first time we've been in Poland. We're about to see our first Polish player on the feature table. What does it mean for these local communities having a major event like this with over 700 participants in their city?
Absolutely. If you've been following the Pokemon circuit for the last couple of years, we have been expanding more regionals, more special events all over Europe, but Poland so far was not part of that. But Polish players still having a good showing at all those international events all over Europe, but that also actually having the possibility to bring your community together to one of these big events, having all those big players, not only from Europe, but also we saw in the first round from Canada, from US, all coming over to play in this event is really great. Playing in a home turf, starting with 2 wins, 6 points. Of course, you want to represent Poland at this regional.
Yeah, we had two players beforehand. I think it was Alex and Antek were talking a little bit about being a Polish player and what it means. And I had a good chance to chat with those as well a few days ago. And they have this national event here where loads of players, I think it's 120 they had in their most recent one, all come to the local area. And they let me know beforehand, watch out for some of these Polish players. They're going to catch some people off guard. Many of them traveling around the world now, and that's exciting for the Polish region. But there's going to be a few of those sneaky ones who only stay in Poland, don't have the ability to travel, whether it be for work or money reasons, whatever it is. And they'll be coming up today because it's accessible for them and maybe taking down big names like Joe.
Absolutely. Accessibility of tournaments is a great factor here at local events. We're actually jumping straight into game one here from what it looks. We talk a lot about Peter now, but Joe, actually a caster himself. On the big stage, typically behind the desk, but has chosen to play this event. And it's really great to see how active our community of casters are, that they're still playing tournaments, maybe even getting an invite early on in the season with Worlds in Yokohama coming up. That's one key thing to keep in mind. So Joe and Peter, both their setup is ready. They have their active Pokemon, and it looks like there was one mulligan, one extra card to be drawn, and the game is about to start.
Yeah, Joe, I'm a big fan of Joe myself. Big fan of his videos. One half of Omnipoke that puts out content all the time and very aware of what the local scene is doing. As you said, a caster as well, has to be so in tune with the players, but also very experienced player, as you mentioned. He's won events before, and that's something not many players in this hall will have done, especially events of this kind of size. So definitely got the experience. You can see here him taking notes of what he's looking at right now, and that kind of extra level of ability that these players have developed, whether it be, do you know what, I play better when I write down notes. It'd be, I play better when I'm on the main table and I just sort of take my time. You know, they find out these habits that help them perform at their best level in a high pressure situation like this on the big table.
Yeah, The Hisuian Heavy Ball is an interesting card. It gives you two options. One, some decks, like the Regigigas, for example, heavily rely on having access to some of the Pokemon, right? So if two of your Regis are priced, you need one of them, use the Hisuian Heavy Ball and get access to that. The other option, and that's quite interesting in the history of Pokemon, is like getting access to the prize cards. Which of your cards are priced? They used to be like town map, and some players were using that. It actually like opens up your prize cards, so you have an overview. You can actually choose which one to draw after taking knockouts. But this is here in Heavy Ball. Early on, like we saw no deck search from Joe before, he had the option to check, hey, what is priced? I know this very early on. I can take notes. I know what is priced from now on, and then I can go into my deck and I can save that the mental capacity to actually remember what is in my deck, count cards, and figure out what is priced.
Yeah, and you mentioned a few examples, but of course now Radiance being such a big factor, only one allowed in the deck, all of them being basics, great synergy there with the Hisuian Heavy Ball, and the secondary effect of I can check all my prizes being such a massive factor there, and Joe getting a good start there, getting the attachment on Arceus. That's all that's really needed at this stage. Got the Bidoof down. Something in this matchup that's really key is making sure you don't overbench stuff that you don't need to. Something like that Crobat is a tool to get you out of a situation, but one that you don't want to have to use here, because that bench sniping potential with the Sableye, and also the fact that they've got the Snorlax, which can hit for 180, a one prize taking out a two prize, is something he's going to have to think about and not want to give up too easily. But for now, Lost Box, all they're going to be doing is that typical flower selecting to try and get the items and the various cards into that lost zone and start getting those numbers up. Obviously 4 being the big starting point to get the Cramorant into effect, but then we've got a Mirage Gate or 2 in here, and that's going to need to get up to 7 into that lost zone.
Absolutely, getting that early on. If he maybe also gets access to Color's Experiment to put 2 more cards into that lost zone, he would already be at 4. So that would be one option to keep in mind. Joe, of course, he needs that Arceus with the energy early on. If he can evolve that next turn into the V-Star, he then has the option to go for a search, get 2 more cards, get his game ready. We talked about, you actually brought up the Radiant cards, and the Radiant Gardevoir is actually an interesting tech, especially in the Giratina maybe mirror match, where taking 20 less damage when Giratina has 280 HP and does 280 damage is a big role. However, playing against a single price deck with no Pokemon V, this card is not as relevant in this matchup.
Yeah, and the meta right now, there's a lot of Pokemon that can knock out for full damage, right? You said 280. We looked at Palkia earlier today. That can take those one-hit knockouts on the V-Stars. And having that damage reduction and looking forward into Silver Tempest where we've got V-Guard energy, it is looking to trend towards that. I want to stop you getting a one-hit knockout rather than the tempo of I'm just going to take prizes as consistently as fast as possible. And we do see that Cramorant attack coming through. Spit Innocently has been activated thanks to the 4 Lost Zone cards there. The Lost Provisions activated then. So we see that early tempo from the Lost Box as expected from the Polish local.
Yeah, absolutely. But Joe evolved both his V-Star Pokemon and his uses V-Star power from the Arceus, having access to any 2 cards from his deck right now. Probably going for that double energy, maybe a way to retreat. That's what we're looking at right now. And then has the option to take out a knockout and attach up to 3 energies to his Giratina.
Yeah, this is the classic, the way we look for 2 cards. You're always going to be thinking, how can I use my Starbirth most effectively? First of all, you hope you've got the cards in your hand, but a lot of the time you're just thinking, I want to get Arceus into the active spot, I need to power up with energy, and then from that point on, you've got everything you need to continue. And the Escape Rope will allow the attack on the Comfey, so reducing the amount of outs to flower selecting as well. So Escape Rope in that situation, more preferable. There is a switch and an Escape Rope in the deck, so that's where Joe has gone for that option.
Yeah, and he plays down Path of the Peak. Once you have used your V-Star ability, you no longer need like these abilities, especially from Arceus and Giratina. You of course have your Crobat that you can use, but you're in a very commanding position, so you might not need that as much.
You don't want to use it. So it's almost like him saying, I don't want to use Crobat. This stops me using Crobat.
Absolutely. And the other thing, and this might come down later in the game, Path of the Peak actually blocks that Radiant Charizard.
Oh yes, of course. The big one-hit knockout option in single prize decks. There's some variation in the Lost Box, whether you go for the Radiant Charizard or the Radiant Greninja. In this matchup, the Charizard's a useful asset. It will help you get that final knockout with the choice belts that are available. So there is a ability to power it up though with the Mirage Gate, and the twin energies are available. So doesn't have to go down to the low prizes of 1 or 2 prizes to take that attack cost away. But 3 fire energy in there, something to manage when sending stuff to the lost zone. So a lot to think about here for Piotr.
Yeah, we already seen like 110 damage on that Giratina V-Star, and if later on the game the Sableye is activated and gets to spread 120 damage or like 12 damage counters, you might split that over the board to make sure that once your Charizard hits the field, anything is at 250 or below to be able to be picked up. We talked about the Mirage Gate getting up to 2 energies. Charizard, yes, takes less energies the more prize cards your opponent has taken, but if you have access to that early on, doing that heavy damage, especially against those V-Star Pokemon, taking those knockouts early on and not only when your opponent's down to 2 prizes is very important.
Yeah, and the Radiant Gardevoir has not been revealed yet, so that might not be a factor that Piotr will think about when assessing the damage spread. And that 20 damage could come in later on when thinking about the attacks from your opponents. But it's one of those, it won't be relevant in this match called no Vs. I just remembered because Charizard it's not a rule box, it's Vs, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I was thinking Charizard rule box. My bad.
Yeah, you see that with like Path of the Thief blocking rule box Pokemon, but then at the same time, there's like the mechanic of Pokemon V as well, of course.
Yeah, Loving Veil only blocking Pokemon V. So Radiant Gardevoir won't be relevant in this matchup. But the Flying Pikachu hasn't come out, so I think the approach here from Joe is not going to take into account the basics blocking.
Absolutely. So it blocks basics from, does it block damage or attacks? It actually blocks him from attacks. So damage done by attacks. However, Sableye has an effect, so it won't be blocked by that. So yeah, you block that Cramorant, but not the Sableye. We see Sableye hitting the field, doesn't have an energy yet, and looking at the Lost Zone, we're currently at 6 cards. Actually 7 with that VIP pass.
Yeah, so the start of the Mirage Gate ability to come through, that will open up access to the Snorlax and potentially the Charizard if they want to go down the route of powering that up more manually without allowing its ability to take over, which might be needed with the Path to the Peak. There is some Stadium Bounce potential from the Lost Box. We've got the Magma Basin. We've seen Lost Box have all sorts of different variations, and Path to the Peak has been a choice in Lost Box in the past, especially towards list that did well in America. And I think this list is a little bit more of the early list where the aggressive Charizard finish, and then with some new additions like the Snorlax to try and have higher damage output against Vs.
Absolutely. I think considering Joe is playing against a single prize deck, he wants to make sure that he's attacking with Arceus as often as possible, because the second effect of that attack of Giratina V-Star is that 2 of your energies go into the Lost Zone. So if you attack quite often and you have to keep discarding those energies into the Lost Zone, you might eventually run out of energy. So having that Trinity Nova attack, being able to take knockouts easily on those single.
Yeah, and as mentioned earlier on, the notes from Joe making it very easy for him to track his prizes as something I think he's done on stream as well quite a lot, and I think it sets a really good precedent. Some players can hold it in their head really well. There are some genius players out there, but again, as we mentioned in the past, on stage there's an added pressure for these players where everything you can do to stop you having to retain stuff in your head and overthink about things can really help you in those high pressure moments, and that comes with that experience on the feature tables.
Absolutely, and keep attacking with the Arceus also allows you to charge up your Pokemon on the bench that if they eventually become active might be easily retreated because they have the energy attached already, or might become attackers themselves later on in the game.
Yeah, so we're going to be looking now at the prize map as we start to get into the meat of this game. And the first prize was taken by Joe, which you'd expect with that Arceus, and I think he went first as well. So he's got ahead. He's taken those 2 prizes, but as we know, the trade into Lost Box can be unfavorable because they get to trade 1 for 2. So Joe is just trying to tempo his way through this game, put stuff on the bench, make it as hard to finish off as possible, and make things as big and as bulky as possible. No big charms in here. Which sometimes features in Arceus decks now, just to try and help take the edge off of the damage. And I mentioned earlier about Cheryl being used across, I think it was in Singapore, they were using Cheryl a lot. It wouldn't work so well in this deck because you'd lose all that energy. But there is potential for different ways of healing that Joe has opted to not go for, going to make it potentially tougher for him to win that prize race.
Absolutely. We see the Colors experiment played, and Piotr actually takes his time to make sure that he's picking out the 2 right cards from that. And I think that actually gets to the Lost Zone count up to 10 and activates his Sableye. One interesting fact, we have both Pokemon V-Stars at 110 damage, so they have 170 HP remaining, so Sableye alone won't be enough to actually take out either of these. However, since you have to take 6 prizes, which equals 3 Pokemon V, or V-Star in this case, it might be an option to actually go to damage one of the V Pokemon in the back, attack them twice, knock them out, and with the 110 damage, you can use the Charizard to attack both of these Pokemon and take both of them out. Yeah,
and you see lots of powered up Pokemon on the bench there. The second Arceus, not evolved into a V-Star yet, but has got enough energy to be able to attack. They're going to be options for Joe to switch into. We mentioned about healing options. Sharon's Care might be in Piotr's mind. He might be thinking, oh, if I attack the Arceus, I need to make sure I knock them out because they might be able to pick them up. But not. We know that's not going to be the case here. So Joe is just trying to hit consistently every turn, get that damage down, take a knockout every single turn. And right now, this is the point, the turning point. We see that Snorlax down. This is where that 170 damage that you mentioned, the Snorlax hits for 180. That's the way to get that knockout now. So hoping to get that Arceus KO with a Mirage Gate. So we'll see if they got that in hand now.
Absolutely. That's is that a quick ball grabbing the Snorlax, or is it a quick ball discarding the Snorlax?
I wonder.
That's one thing to figure out. But yeah, the 180 damage from that Snorlax is actually another threat to consider. But it seems like he's discarding the Snorlax to pick up the Charizard.
Okay.
Maybe load that up with a Mirage Gate and start attacking, taking knockouts. For Joe, it's very clear. He has to keep attacking. He needs 4 more knockouts. But Piotr has to start thinking, like, I have to start eventually picking up prizes, get there so that I can win the game. Otherwise, it will be really hard for him. So he has that Charizard. And another thing to keep in mind, we mentioned this earlier, is the path of the peak. However, we see the stadium in Peter's hand.
Yeah, so be able to bump that stadium, maybe use that magma basin and power it up. And that's the route he's decided to take here. There's so many different routes with these decks, and that's one of the key factors in the experience here. Oh, that Mirage Gate going into the Lost Zone.
That was a very difficult decision because he placed 2 of the magma stadiums. So one was in his hand, and the second one, together with the Mirage Gate, was coming off the Flower Whale. So either he discards the item and doesn't have the option to load up his Charizard as quickly as possible, or he gets rid of the stadium, but then he might lose the Stadium War, and Path to the Peak might eventually block out the Charizard for the rest of the game.
Yeah, lovely turn there from Piotr. So the 2 prizes taken by Joe, taking that attack cost of the Charizard down by 2 energy. So 1 Twin Energy, 1 Fire Energy from the Magma Basin, and that was enough to get the knockout. So relying on the Charizard here, rather than going for that Snorlax route, which I think is a fair approach because Snorlax gets stuck in the active, maybe feeling a bit more confident in the Charizard to continue attacking, and having access to other cards to keep repeating those attacks is going to be useful for the future.
Yeah, especially with Clara in mind. You have that Snorlax in discard pile, so you always have the option to bring it back later on in the game, but it seemed like he decided that Charizard at this point in the game is his choice. Use the Stadium, has the Fire Energy double, and attacks, takes the knockout. However, Joe, he had his whole bench ready, had the second Arceus ready, evolved that now, a full fresh one, no damage on it, 280 HP. And yeah, Charizard without any prior damage won't be able to knock that out.
And we see the Path Marnie. We've spoken a lot about the tempo of this current meta and how missing a beat of 1 turn can be a factor in losing a game. We saw it earlier with the Hsu and Zoroark versus Palkia. Both players missing a turn that they were hoping to hit the target, and it meant that they were going back and forth. And this is another great example of that. Path plus Marnie can give you so many options. The only thing that the Path will be affecting here will be that ability to get another Charizard out easily, because the Magma Basin not only accelerates but gets rid of that Path to activate the ability. So Joe really targeting the Charizard with that Path Marnie play.
Absolutely. Of course, Joe doesn't know what Peter's hand was like, but with that Marnie and the Magma Basin in the hand, it's actually going to the bottom of the deck. So unless there's a way to reshuffle his deck, he won't have access to that stadium anytime soon. So that's one thing to consider. Charizard is being knocked out, Path to the Peak and Marnie, and let's see if Peter has a way to come back into this game.
Yeah, really needs that stadium to use the Charizard again. And we mentioned that various options. Snorlax would be an option to take out the benched Tina that's got damage on it. But in the case of the Arceus and the active, that needs 280 damage. So that would need to be a choice-belted Charizard for that knockout. So a lot to reach for there. Thankfully, the Lost Box with the flower selecting and the on the Comfy does give you the ability to dig quite deep. But as we mentioned, it's right at the bottom, that Magma Basin. So going to need to find a way to shuffle as well as dig.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think this might be a great turn to actually attack with Sableye maybe, spread some damage over on the board, prepare everything for Charizard to come and be able to take 2 knockouts. So if you do at least 30 damage on the active Arceus V-Star, preparing the knockout on the Giratina V-Star, which is also ready to attack with 3 energies attached at this point. So maybe spreading some damage and then getting Charizard ready for next turn. We see Mirage Gate played, and I think this energy only has one target, and that's the Sableye. Checking that, attaching maybe 2 energies, or just lying them out to check how many energies he has. But I think that might be one option here. Attaching them, attacking, and then being ready for next turn.
I think the biggest bit of text on that Mirage Gate card is and shuffle your deck, and that will hopefully bring the options for the Charizard up, because that is the dream scenario right now, getting that Charizard back and being able to Magma Basin it. As you mentioned, Clara is an option to get it back, but this is the reason why Marnie is so good against Lost Zone decks. They get through a lot of cards, they build their hand up to a large size, and when you hit that Marnie, it takes away so many options, and then you start having to have those challenging Lost Zone decisions of what do you get rid of, and we saw one of those with the Mirage Gate and the Magma Basin. So there's going to be some tough decisions here, under pressure on the feature table as well, but getting the new flower selecting, hopefully some more dig here, maybe seeing some useful cards from for that Charizard knockout. But this does not look like a good decision here. Uncomfortable.
We actually see the choice belt, which would do another 30 damage, which would get up to that 280 actually. So keeping that,
I think he has to.
He has to. The money won't really help him here either. But yeah,
he's got rid of it. So I think he's going to have to play through a longer journey now. There's no chance for that one-hit knockout with the Charizard, so he's going to have to take a slower, more disruptive route. So that Marnie might be useful now.
Yeah, he's playing down another Comfy and going for the escape rope. Might bring up his Sableye, looking for maybe Giratina V-Star ready to attack for next turn as an option for Joe to promote. And then, yeah, so it seems like very clear at this point that Sableye is attacking, spreading 100 damage, and then maybe for the future games, for the future turns, sets up that Charizard.
Yeah, so Joe here taking his time, making sure those decisions are correct. Not fully aware that the choice belt situation leads to the full safety of his full HP V-Stars, but he might have an inkling after seeing those 2 choice belts in the Lost Zone that could put him in the safety net. So he puts up that Giratina V-Star and then has the option to attack with that in the next turn. The Giratina V-Star attack we're going to be seeing a lot of over the weekend. That Star Requiem, not so relevant in this matchup because the Lost Zone's not going to be in effect for Joe, but Lost Impact hitting for 280. Definitely a bit of overkill against Lost Box, but a consistent, solid attack in any matchup, which you know you're going to get knockouts with.
Absolutely. And we see like this Sableye attacking, and it actually comes down to spraying the damage all over the board. We see 30 going on the active, 30 on the Arceus V-Star, so they're both in 250 range. Considering that he was planning to attack with the Sableye, I assume you no longer needed the choice belt for any additional damage because you have the 30 spread out all over the place anyway. So yeah, that's one thing to keep in mind. Having that Sableye, you no longer need the choice belt. Having a second Sableye on the board, and then getting ready to attack. However, Joe down to 3 prize cards, taking 1 in the upcoming turn, down to 2, and then Peter has like 2 more turns, and he has to take knockouts back to back, or he will be losing this game.
Yeah, the Arceus Tina archetype is definitely one that wants to try and avoid benching stuff that's not needed. And with Bibarel being the only single prize on the bench, it's quite safe from that Sableye because it's irrelevant to knock out the Bibarel except for reducing draw potential. But at this stage, Joe has everything set up. So that Bibarel is going to remain there as a safety net for Joe if he needs to draw more cards. If the Crobat had been down or the Pumpkaboo was started or needed to bump a stadium at any point, then that's going to be where the single prizes might get targeted by Piotr. But at this stage, he just needs to get those 3 V-Star knockouts to try and break down that full 6 prize composition.
Yeah, it's interesting. We see the boss coming into effect, picking up the comfy with the balloon, picks up one prize card that you need anyway, and gets rid of the balloon. So it gives you less switching options. He might still promote the other comfy next turn, but he needs another switching card to not only use the ability, but then also go back into Sableye to attack. So reducing the options to either draw more cards or be able to retrieve. Retreat the Pokemon is a great tool here to keep your winning position. And we see actually great effect here. You have to discard 2 energies, but it's not 2 energy discards, it's 2 energies, which means you can use that double turbo energy.
Yeah, 2 energy from any of your Pokemon. And the moment I found out about that when I was playing Arceus Giratina, I was over the moon, because the amount of times you're worried you're not going to be able to reset that Giratina. And as we mentioned, that is a bulky Giratina right now. It has got 3 damage counters on it from that Sableye. That will be setting up the Charizard attack. But he's going to hope that Giratina can last into the next turn, hopefully with that path sticking and making the Charizard too tough to power up. We know the Mirage Gates are now used and have been out the game, one in the Lost Zone, one in the discard pile. And the Sableye still remains because Joe went for the Comfey instead. I think that's a sign that Joe is comfortable with the idea of Sableye attacking for the rest of the game. And right now, the dig is going to be for that Charizard.
Okay, and looking at this damage, he's taking out the Giratina here, taking another 2 prize cards, and that's what I meant earlier. He now is in a good position because Joe might take out 1 knockout, but if Peter has all the tools he needs to get his Charizard and attack for 1 single energy, then he wins this game. So it's all about how Joe combats this. If he has maybe another Mani, because we saw that Peter is having that Magma base in his hand actually, so he has the option to get rid of the Path of Peak. So I mean, Joe does know that, but we might see how this comes into effect here.
Yeah, lovely play from the local Polish player. You know, there's so many routes you can take to victory with Lost Box, and a lot of it depends on what you get access to, what's in your prizes, what you have to put in the Lost Zone. He recognized that Charizard was not viable, went for the Sableye route, and is now in this position. As we said about the basic blocking, Charizard cannot attack that Pikachu after it's just made an attack because it blocks out attacks from the basic. So Joe, as we mentioned, is fine with a Sableye attacking for the rest of the turn, but Max Balloon will stop during your opponent's next turn. It will stop them from attacking if they are a basic Pokemon. So no damage taken by that Pikachu VMAX, Flying Pikachu VMAX. So this is a powerful position for Joe, forcing as many questions out of his opponent. Do you have Gust? Do you have that Charizard? Otherwise, I can take a few Sableyes for a few turns.
Exactly. 2 more KOs needed. We actually saw Mani being played. Draws 4 cards, which also gets rid of Peter's hand.
Oh, we will see the Magma base, and that's the question. We want to know whether that Charizard is an option. But again, there's so much to get here for Peter. Still, I'm still unsure on the pronunciation. This is going to be the biggest challenge of the weekend. We've got so much variety and nationality here at the event. Same thing happens every European event. All over Europe, players will come here. And right now, the Polish player is looking to close out this game against Joe. Joe just needs to play 1 more turn, can attack anything with any of his powered up attackers, and he will win the game. Right now, Piotr needs to find a way to knock out any of the bench Vs. In particular, he needs that Charizard to hit for damage. Oh, the Bibarel is an option.
That's an option for sure.
To send up, it's safety.
Yep, because if you take that knockout, you only get 1 prize card, so it doesn't really help Peter. So Peter, on top of that, either needs another escape rope, maybe a gust effect, but he also needs a way to get an attacker into the field. And it doesn't seem like he has an option to grab that Charizard just of yet so far. Using more of those favorable abilities, going through the decks. He has a full hand of cards. And there's a Clara.
The Clara, that's step 1, but then there's no gust ability with that. The only gust he's able to use is the escape rope, which Joe is in control of who goes up. And as we saw, Bibarel was a fine option for Joe. Now Joe needs to find a way to retreat that, and having used his escape rope and his switch, he might need to do that through attachment. And so there's a lot of resources now for Joe to manage to make sure he can get the attack off.
Absolutely. And the question is, will he actually attack with... Oh, we see he has the energy. He is attaching, retrieving, attacking, and taking the final knockout. So game 1 actually goes to Joe.
Yeah, so very good play by Joe, and it was a close game throughout. And this is how this matchup's going to go. Joe's going to be able to just announce attack every turn for 6 turns in a row and just keep asking the questions. Can you deal with this path? Can you deal with this Mani? Can you deal with me taking out some of your Comfeys? And Joe did that perfectly, had all the options to cover at the end. But again, it was in favour of the Lost Box at points where if they'd found the right cards at the right time, then it would have been a win for Lost Box. So very close matchup there.
Absolutely. The money not only bringing you down to 4 cards, but having that stadium that you needed being put under the deck is actually unfortunate for Peter here. However, we have 2 more games. This was actually a long drawn-out game. So let's see if Peter can come back into this game. Maybe with a quicker win, so he has an option to go into game 3. However, Joe hungry for that 3rd win in this tournament, up 1-0 now, and he will try to get that 2nd win here as well.
Yeah, you mentioned time. How important is time for these players on the big stage, and especially with the pressure?
Absolutely, absolutely. We see them starting to set up their game. Peter maybe going through some of his plays thinking, having seen this Pikachu card, knowing that I have to play around the Pikachu on top of the path of the peak, a lot of options to go through actually there. Using this time while shuffling your cards to actually maybe come up with a new game plan. You have to adjust as you go, of course, but having an idea of what your opponent showed you in the first game and making use of that knowledge can go a long way. Yeah,
and we'll see if the Snorlax takes part in the next game. A bit tougher to power up than the Charizard because you've got 3 energies. You'll need that Mirage Gate potentially plus a Twin Energy. So definitely a different route to knocking out. So if you can get that Cramorant attack in early, the Spit Innocently to get 110, it might be able to set up a Snorlax, which is why it's so deadly in there. And equally on the other side, Joe just might not have the ability to control whether he puts a Crobat down or a Pumpkaboo down, and maybe might start with a Guardy. So there's lots of things on Joe's side that could go wrong based off of that early start. But the Arceus start versus the Guru, the Oranguru there at the start is going to be optimal for both sides. Preferably a Comfey coming in soon, but they are going to have the ability to start working their way through the deck.
Yeah, like looking at game 1, like Joe really had all the tools he needed, but considering he was playing Arceus, he had the attachment in turn 1, he had the evolution in turn 2. Then from that moment on, you're pretty set up. You get your energies on the board as well, and you didn't have to use any of them.
I wonder if that Comfey was a top deck. I assume so by the fact he instantly switched into it. So the Oranguru was the only option for the basic. Top deck, the Comfey had the switch out, starts doing those flower selectings nice and early, but does now have the ability to dig a bit deeper with all of the single prize abilities on his side. And for Joe, he's just going to want to get an attachment down.
Absolutely, absolutely. Didn't look like a really great turn for Peter. Didn't have a great starting hand. Then drew the Comfey, but that was only one single time he could use the ability. Only 1 card in a lost zone. Joe looking through his hand. He has an Ultra Ball, has access to more cards, and if he can get down the attachment as well, he would be in a very commanding position in this game.
Yeah, just looking at the prizes, 2 paths on the side for Joe, and that leaves 1 in the deck. So not as easy to keep putting that down. Only relevant to the Charizard, so maybe as he draws prizes, he'll find those options. On the other side, a Mirage Gate prize is probably the most relevant thing for Piotr there, Peter. I wonder what chat's thinking right now. I wonder what chat's thinking of the pronunciation there, Peter or Piotr. Feel free to correct us, and I'd love to get their name correct here. But yeah, Mirage Gate there. Only 2 of them in the deck, and it could be relevant for the Snorlax or the Charizard to power it up. And we saw it used to get Sableye powered up when there wasn't an ability to naturally attach last game.
Yeah, well, there's no order in which you have to take your prize. We have to assume that it starts from the bottom up. So having access to that Mirage Gate once you draw 2 prize cards would be a great tool. On the other side, Path of the Peak being rather to the top, Path to the Peak, and having only 1 option. I'm pretty sure that Joe is going through that deck, and he will probably take notes on what might or is definitely like priced in this game, taking his time here, and then eventually getting that Birel down.
Yeah, so on Piotr's side, the Lost Box only has the boss. 1 single boss to guarantee that knockout on a benched V. So Joe will be concerned about that Crobat, which he's discarded, and thinking, I don't want to put that down. That's a threat that they could get a good prize swing on. But actually, the access to the bench, except for pushing with the escape rope and asking for them to move up themselves, there's not a huge amount of danger with Pokemon moving to the bench, and we saw Joe had a lot of damage just sitting on the bench last game, which was safe from being knocked out by an attack.
Absolutely. We see Joe playing the money, and the question is, will he get the energy attachment he needs for this turn? It doesn't look like he has any energy in hand, has a second Arceus, but not having that energy in the first turn like really stops you from setting up. Yeah,
the Arceus, when evolved, does have the Trinity charge with damage, but if you can get the double turbo energy in your turn 1, you can start getting energy on the board, and it's not super key whether you get that attack off, but it's key that you get some kind of attachment, because you really want to be able to power up fully to start doing damage on turn 2. So Joe, I think here, has just decided to scoop, has recognized that's too slow a start, and this is that experience coming through, a player recognizing there's not enough time and just wants to go straight into the next game.
Absolutely interesting choice. Like, yeah, we have around 20 minutes left in this round, and Joe might be thinking, with a better start, with my attachment in turn 1, I have a better shot at winning this game. However, setting up another game will take some time, and it will actually be close. Seeing, like, we saw Peter like barely doing anything in this second game and then being the winner is really interesting. And I'm like interested to find out if Joe actually pull it through and come back in game 3.
Yeah, we mentioned the tempo that Joe needs with his deck. Is it 6 attacks announced across the game, so a lot of turns are going to need to be played, a lot of time needed, and the fact that he missed the tempo going second, is almost no chance he'd be able to keep up with the lost box. So by going first, you get that energy attachment, you start attacking with your energy from the Trinity charge. Everything in favor of that Arceus deck will be by going first. So a smart decision. I mean, to be honest, I'm sure Joe was going into that game thinking, unless I'm doing wonderful and they're not doing well, I'm probably just going to be going game 3.
Start, yeah, absolutely. Like, we saw in game 1 how good the setup of Joe was. He got everything he needed, started attacking very on, and the game was still very close until the end. So if you don't have that good start, it's really hard against that one single price deck.
Yeah, so for the local Piotr on stage, going to game 3 against a seasoned veteran in Joe, one experience for him, and that might actually throw him off. I don't know how he'll react to that. Whenever a player scoops, you're thinking, hang on, they know something I don't, and they know this matchup inside out. So there's going to be some pressure there. And also going into that match point game is always a lot more nerve-wracking when you're having to make those tough decisions. What are you going to flower select either way?
But look at that start for game 3. Joe actually attaches an energy to Piotr and passes.
Not like this. Joe is not happy right now. The body language says it all. And we know how easy it is to hit that 110 with the Cramorant for Lost Box. This is the dream situation for Piotr right now. But you see the prizes, there's 3 escape ropes, but there's so many switch outs. Surely right now Piotr's going to dig. He's got the Chorus Experiment and everything.
Yeah, if we see some VIP passes to get actually more confidence on the field as well, 2 energies, 2 cards would actually already hit the Lost Zone. So, yeah, he still needs to get rid of that Manafi in the active position. It is quite a few tools that you need, but it's not quite impossible. We see 2 balls there to get all the Pokemon.
So much search right here. That's a Comfey right there. And just a load of switch outs. They need 2 switch outs, and I think they've got it.
Absolutely. He needs 2 Comfies, 2 switch outs, activate ability twice, and then the Cramorant, and this might be a very quick game 3.
Yeah, and we say all this stuff, like the Comfey is also going to be finding you more cards. So this is a very likely situation right now for Lost Box, and Piotr knows that, but he needs to just take his time. As you can see, he's not rushing anything. The worst thing you could do right now with 17 minutes on the clock is start rushing a turn 1 attack that could win in the game. So just thinking ahead, making sure he gets the route sussed out completely.
Absolutely, and we see that he has the 4th escape rope. He's playing 4, 3 of them are prized, and he has the 4th one in his starting hand, which is very convenient here. That has 1 switching option, a 2nd one, and this is the path to victory for Peter now. If he can finish up this puzzle with all the pieces he needs.
I mean, he's discarded the Twin Energy, which is also a switching option. So clearly in tune with what's available, and just needs 2 Comfey flower selectings to get that Lost Zone number up to 4. Then that Cramorant, which he's just found from the deck, into the active, and that will hit for 110, which is enough to knock out the lone Bidoof on the side of Joe. And that is just sometimes how Pokemon goes.
Absolutely. Very unfortunate. Scooping game 2, basically in turn 2, right? And then going into game 3, be like, no, I got this. Starting with Bidoof, energy attachment, and pass, well, that's not what you want to see. However, let's not call it quite off yet. There's still a few actions to play. Comfy first, bringing up to 3 Lost Zone count. Let's see what options he gets, though.
Oh, and Battle VIP Pass. Which one do you take, the left or the right one? Well, he's going to take one of them, which is going to give options that I don't know if he necessarily needs. But he's got the Twin Energy, which will allow him to do 1 more retreat, and he needs 2 more retreats, right?
Absolutely.
So 1 more retreat to get to the next Comfey, and then 1 more retreat after that to get to the Cramorant. No energy needed for the Cramorant attack once there's 4 in the Lost Zone. So there is a lot right now to think through just to guarantee And let's just take a moment. Obviously, we talk about consistency with decks, and we've mentioned a few of the decks that are going to be doing well here at this event due to their consistency. And I definitely think Joe's deck is on the side of maybe not as consistent as the rest, except for once you get that Arceus V-Star into play. It's that first turn that's so key for him.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the basic Pokemon, he has 4 Arceus, he has 2 Bidoof and 2 Giratina and 1 Pikachu, plus 3 more basics. So he has a lot of basics, but like obviously the Bidoof probably as a single Pokemon to have is not the best choice. So not having a second basic Pokemon and specifically ending up with Bidoof, very unlikely here. Not what you want to see. We see the first switch with that energy attachment.
Needs a switch out through this. And I think the decision would have been made if it was there. So just a little bit of thinking required here. Maybe another option needed. What do we see there? It's a Mirage Gate going into the Lost Zone. So maybe Joe will get a chance to play his second turn here.
Yeah, so it was not quite over just yet. He's missing the second piece to withdraw another Pokemon. He has a Quick Ball, but I don't think he has any Pokemon to get any extra cards. Oh yeah.
Okay, just pass.
Yeah, the Oranguru is also prized. Otherwise, he could have picked that up with a Quick Ball there, and then get access to one more card on top of his deck to maybe get the switching option. So I'm sure Joe is a little bit relieved there. However, like his starting hand was not great, and let's see if he can come back from that. He has a boss to stall out. Like let's see what.
Okay, so he's just using that boss to thin his hand down. I think he bossed the other Comfey, so they didn't switch. Gives him another card draw from that Babaro with the Industrious Incisors. Well, I was sure that was going to go for the first turn knockout, but I think Joe was feeling the same way. He thought it was very likely, and unfortunately for Piotr, just didn't ever find that extra switch out. But this does mean we're now in a game where Joe is a little bit behind to start with, but the lack of attack, we're kind of back on even playing field, I'd say.
Yeah. I mean, we see the Ultra Ball getting 2 more Pokemon, so at least like he's not in fear of getting donked here in that game. But still, like he needs an energy attachment on the Arceus, and he's like basically 1 turn ahead. And Peter got his energy, like his Lost Zone count to 4 already. If we see a Caller's Experiment and more Comfey's action there, we might be soon up to 10.
I've just seen there, he put that Flying Pikachu down straight away to avoid being donked, having extra Pokemon on the bench. He might have been thinking, I'm going to go down the route of my Flying Pikachu VMAX, and that would be an option to go for the force Sableye every single turn. None of their basics would be able to attack. But then now he's going through and checking his prizes, he'll be aware that Flying Pikachu VMAX is actually in the prizes. So that option no longer available, so he's going to have to start thinking about other things. And the Radiant Guardian is coming down now, which... definitely a unique approach. There is the ability to use the Psychic attack on there because he has got Psychic Energies due to the Giratina. So he's going to be looking to go down that route and charge up that, thinking probably, well, they're going to get a knockout in the Babaro, so if I can get that Guardi active, then that's another option to attack. But I think at the moment it's just scrambling for options after every option that he wanted wasn't quite there.
Yeah, like Peter has to take 6 prizes, and with single prize Pokemon like the Bibarel, taking that knockout won't really help you because you still need to KO 3 VMAX or like V Pokemon basically. You might hit a second single prize Pokemon, but even that Radiant Gardevoir has like 130 HP, so it's not quite in range of that Cramorant or even the Sableye. So these are like 2 things. Like if he keeps the Bibarel active and starts spreading damage, that would be one option. Taking the knockout, like yes, gets rid of the drawing option of Joe, but it's not as powerful early on in the game.
Yeah, Joe is a very animated player as well, and we can see based off of his reaction what we should all be thinking this game is going. Not looking happy. I wonder how much of that is due to the prized Pikachu, how much of it is due to the lack of energy attachment, how much of it is due to everything that's going on right now. But on the other side, what an experience, though, for a Polish player to go on the feature table and play, and he's playing very well. He's playing very calmly, making good decisions, and there's a lot of decisions to make with this Lost Box. So a great representation here for the Polish region.
Yeah, we see like both Snorlax ending up in the Lost Zone, so that's definitely not an option he has left for this game. But I think his Lost Zone is like up at 8. Joe's keeping track of us. Thanks for that. And we might see like Sableye getting into action very soon. But there's a 110 damage, and Bibarel is down to 10 HP.
Yeah, setting up the potential with the Sableye. You've mentioned how that Sableye it's a damage effect. It can hit anyone, anywhere. And the Bibarel right now is just sitting in the active. If he were to knock it out, it would activate Raihan. It would also activate the ability to switch something into the active. So by doing that 110 and setting up for the future with the Sableye, it might seem like he was avoiding the knockout, but it's actually a very smart play to just set things up for the future, set his own board state up, get more in the lost zone to activate the lost... Is it the Sableye's Lost Mine attack, which needs 10?
Absolutely. If you think like he's spreading 120 damage or 12 damage counters, you might spread them all over the board, but you want to set up those Charizard knockouts. But typically, after spreading 30 on each of the V-Star Pokemon, you still have like 10 left eventually. So you might, when you see fit, take the knockout, but it's also great to have that in the active position and start spreading damage, because it just requires Joey to have one extra card or one extra retreating option that he needs to sacrifice there.
Yeah, and we're early on right now in the Swiss. We're only in round 3. Both these guys 2-0, having a strong start. And this game has definitely been one that could go either way, just based off of the draw and consistency of the decks. They cannot miss a turn as they hoped for, and the disruption on both sides is very effective at slowing down their opposition. Finally, we see Joe able to announce an attack. So he's going to be going for that Arceus V-Star, finally bringing out the Trinity Nova, and he used the Starbirth that turn as well. So no longer accessible for him in a pinch later on, but has everything he needs now to start making those attacks. But has it started soon enough? That's the question.
A very good question. We actually see him charging up the Pikachu. You might be thinking, well, his Pikachu VMAX is priced. However, he has the Hisuian Heavy Ball to get that out. And
oh, he takes it there. So the Hisuian Heavy Ball would have shuffled them up, but naturally taking it off the bottom there is perfect for Joe. Hisuian Heavy Ball only taking basic Pokemon out the prizes, so
very good point.
If he does that, he might be able to get that Giratina that's in there. But at the end of the day, Joe has hit that much needed prize. He's going to be happy about that. Luck's starting to go back in Joe's favour, but Piotr is still on a good rhythm here. Got the damage on the Bibarel, potential to knock that out, and of course having the Radiant Gardevoir there too will allow for 2 single prizes to be knocked out. So when that Sableye starts sprinkling damage around, the Bibarel's gone, and we might see something set up for the big one hits.
Yeah, it's actually interesting in the attack sequencing that your attacks go off first before you draw your prize card. Otherwise, if you had like drawn the prize card first, you could be like, oh, there's my Pikachu, so
exactly.
I can charge up the Pikachu. This way, he had to charge up the Pokemon first, then draw his prize card. Very interesting how that came into effect here. But the Lost Zone up to 9 or even 10 at this point, Sableye activated, and let's see how much advantage he can take of that, because Joe only has taken 1 prize card so far.
Yeah, Piotr has got damage, but only on 1 single prize, so the prize race is still in either player's hands. I think setting up that Charizard in the future is definitely going to be in Piotr's mind, but for now, he's going to be looking to dig deeper, and then, we're getting a Cramorant attack off now, which we said sets up the Snorlax in the future. We'll set up a Charizard and we'll also potentially set up 2 Sableye attacks to eventually knock it out.
Yeah, it seems like he was missing the tools to actually attack with Sableye, which would get you 10 more damage on the board, I suppose. But yeah, like still having damage on those cards, on those V-Star Pokemon to take them out later on. We talked about the Snorlax, the Charizard, but slowly or surely the time comes into effect. Players might not be aware, but there's only 6.5 minutes left. Joe still has to take 5 prize cards. We saw how they went in the Regigigas mirror, where he like had to take 6 prize cards, but there was only so much time left and he couldn't finish the job. On the other side, Piotr, if he like starts attacking soon and takes those big prize cards, big knockouts, then he might have an option. But I see a very hard path for Joe.
Speaking of path, there we go, the path of the peak down, and the Marnie played a classic disruption tool that's been in the game for a while now. It works much better against V-based decks because you get the blocking on that. The only card that's affected in Piotr's deck is that Charizard, so no longer accessible once Joe takes a knockout through the Magma Basin Twin Energy approach. But if the Magma Basin comes out, then that will be the ability to knock the path. So we're seeing a similar line to what happened in that game 1 of Joe starting attacks, disrupting, and just hoping that the rhythm of Piotr is disrupted and won't be able to get as much damage on the board as he's hoping.
Yeah, there's a knockout on the Cramorant, taking the 2nd prize, getting 3 more energies out. It's a great tool. Like I think One thing which separates the good from the very good Pokemon in the trading card game is how flexible they are and how you can pair them with so many Pokemon and how they help you just in advancing in the game in general. Like Arceus, for example, taking your knockout but also filling out your deck plus getting more energies into play. So many great options with one single attack.
Yeah, we'll be looking forward to Silver Tempest. We've got Lugia around the corner. One of the great effects of that ability to search for special energy through the Archeops is, like you said, thinning the deck as well. And something that a lot of newer players might not recognize in these two decks is that ability to make that deck as small as possible, have as many options that you want in that condensed little pile you have left. With the Lost Zone, putting stuff in there that you don't necessarily need will start thinning the deck, and for Joe, energy out of the deck. So both these players starting to get into that game state where they can do what they want as long as they find it.
Yep. We see the damage spread, so taking the knockout on the Bibarel, spreading damage on the V-Star Pokemon, and also some damage on the Radiant God of War to be able to then damage and take it out in another turn if wanted.
Okay.
Damage spread not quite done yet.
Oh, so, there's a lot of thinking needed here for Piotr. All that Sableye damage sprinkled all over the place. So there's one there on the Gardevoir, which will put it in range of a Sableye damage in the future. Two going onto the Giratina. I believe that's just because that was what was left over.
Yep.
But three on that Arceus V-Star, putting it in range of the Charizard without a choice belt. But the Bibarel is knocked out, and that will start that prize collection for Piotr.
Yep, and the remaining also on the active, which is currently at 160, which is not quite enough for Cramorant to pick it up. That would be 10 short, but it is also in range of Sableye. We see another Sableye hitting the bench there, and if he has more energies in the future, he will be able to keep attacking, keep spreading 120 damage. But the question is it enough in time to take enough knockouts?
Yeah, we saw last game the first game, Joe was just happy to let Sableye attack every turn. If you want to try and win the game by doing 120 damage at a time, eventually that will go in favor of Joe with the 280 hit points of the V-Stars. Eventually one turn will be missed and not quite enough to get the trade 2 for 1. At this stage, Joe has taken 2 prizes. We're going to start thinking about Charizard now. It's going to be on the mind of Piotr. And a lot of people at home will also be seeing that 3 minutes on the round in the bottom right corner. So Joe has to start racing through to get the prizes, and for Piotr, he has to start sprinkling that damage as fast as possible. Otherwise, time might be the biggest factor here for him.
Yeah, because Joe only has taken 2 prizes so far. If he takes the third one right now, Charizard still needs quite a few energies, so you will need that Mirror Gate actually activated. I don't know if there are any in the Lost Zone or in the discard pile, but that's one more tool. Looking at the hand, I don't see one quite yet. So there will be one option to keep in mind going into those last couple of turns.
Okay, research. We see a research. So Joe digging for something, maybe thinning out the stuff he doesn't need. And we're going to start seeing that if he's in range of 2 prizes when time is hit, that will be enough. And the same thing for Piotr if he can get the knockouts in 2 turns. And at this stage, this has been a long fought battle. And maybe that quick scoop from Joe might have had just enough time for him to win the final game, or at least play out the final game, whichever way the result goes.
Yeah, that's such a roller coaster of emotions. Winning game 1, going to game 2 scooping, starting so horribly with that single Bidoof in the attack, then surviving that turn, which is very crucial, then coming back and maybe bringing it out into this time.
Yeah, so a big roller coaster of emotion for both players, and of those emotions heightened here on the feature table. And I think this is going to be one of those games which neither player has made any major mistakes. It has just been about that draw and having that consistent deck. And we mentioned that Joe's deck isn't as consistent as a lot of the decks out there. Once the V-Star is down and you're able to start thinning through the energy and you're able to get those 2 cards through the Starbirth, then it's great. It's that start that can be a bit slow for Arceus builds. On the other side, Lost Box is just got to keep digging through the flower selecting and Chorus experiments. Get stuff out of the way, put it in the Lost Zone, not worry about it then, and just hope you have everything you need on every turn that you attack.
Yeah, but another thing we haven't talked about enough is the decision making with this ability. He had a switching option or an energy. He needs the energy to attack with Sableye, but he needs the switching option to bring it into the active. So it's a hard decision to make. He's going for the money, hoping that he finds another switching option because he needs to attack.
Yeah, and you said about the energies. You can only Lost Zone a few energies before you start thinking, I don't have any left. So there is options with Clara to get it out the discard pile, but no way to get it back from the loss zone. And with switching options, the escape ropes, there's 3 of them in the prize cards. So there is a lower frequency of switching options available. And so there is a challenging approach to getting the attacks off, but that Sableye attack able to be announced on this turn, so that takes another 2 prizes. The Arceus V-Star that had a lot of damage on it, able to get knocked out, and so now we're starting to get into those final moments where either player wants to get ahead, and I believe that's what's that token there? Is that time on the round? I think the players have now got a few turns to try and finish it off.
Yeah. Let's see if Joe can take a knockout and before it goes to time to then use the extra 2 turns. If not, then it's really hard to draw 3 more prizes. On the other hand, Peter, he has maybe the Sableye attack into God of War to take a knockout and then get the Charizard for his final KO. However, it's not quite easy, especially if Pikachu VMAX comes into play. Not only does it block basic Pokemon, but it also has 310 HP.
Yeah, I believe in this situation, from what I can see here, Joe cannot win the game because he has no way to take 2 prizes in any turn. With 3 prizes left, he is going to be thinking, I don't want to be knocked out here by that Charizard. If that Charizard is able to knock out the Arceus on the bench with 3 damage counters on it, or if he's able to get a choice belt on it and maybe knock out any of the other V-Stars, then there's big concerns there for Joe, because that Guardy, the Radiant Gardevoir on the bench, is available for a Sableye 120 damage. So Joe right now, he's going to be thinking, this is not a winnable game, and going to be trying to work out how to defensively play out the rest of it.
Absolutely. Sometimes you need to figure out not just how to win, but not to lose. And that's Joe's card here. Playing, having the Path of Peak active, and going for the Marnie, and hoping for the best. Yeah,
we saw the Path plus Marnie combo was a great way to stop the Charizard from being powered up with the Magma Basin. But first off, the 4 cards from the Marnie on the side of Piotr is going to be in his mind as to whether he's able to bump it. And there's a lot right now to think about for Piotr, and he's got the time to do it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Let's see, we obviously don't, it seems like the blue dice now is giving us information on how many turns are left. So this might be the first turn.
Yeah,
we'll
turn
go back to Joe, and then for a 3rd turn to Peter. So Peter has 2 more attacks left, needs to take 3 prize cards.
Yeah, anyone new to Pokemon, when the time on the round is up, there will be a turn 0, which is a turn that is currently being played. Then you have 1, 2, 3. So both players will essentially get 2 more turns to win the game. And right now, Piotr's on turn 1. It will go back to Joe for 1, and then Piotr will get to close it out and try and win the game. And just based off of the way the prizes are right now, it's not looking good for Joe. A draw is the best case scenario.
Absolutely. I think the clear option for this turn for Peter should be knocking out the Gardevoir. And then maybe Choice Belt with the Charizard for the final knockout on either of the remaining Pokemon, except for the flying Pikachu VMAX. So if he has the boss option left, that could be one option. Otherwise, taking out the Guardian, the Radiant Gardevoir here, and taking an escape rope most likely, which helps if Joe decides to promote that flying VMAX.
Yeah, and I think right now we are seeing that Sableye in the active. That's the safe option there. The Magma Basin does come down. The Charizard is able to attack with that Choice Belt. If he can get the Arceus now, who's in the active spot, then that is going to guarantee the Sableye in the future turn. So you mentioned the Sableye now would be a fun option, but there are ways of Joe playing around that with maybe the flying Pikachu, blocking it out, the VMAX with too much HP. But this is the dream scenario to be able to attack with the Charizard. And I think he's just thinking through and making sure that is the correct approach. Manual retreat, discards that energy into the discard pile, has the energy in hand for next turn. So right now, everything to play for Piotr.
Yeah, taking 2 more prize cards. It is an Oranguru and an escape rope. So even if that flying Pikachu VMAX would be active with that escape rope, he would have an option to get rid of that.
And to get into the Sableye. Doesn't matter where your opponent's Pokemon are.
Absolutely.
That Sableye in the active spot can hit any of them.
Yeah. So I think Joe's plan would be to maybe knock out the Sableye, or maybe boss up a Pokemon and hope that it's stuck in the active. But considering all these Pokemon are retrievable with 1 single energy, and Peter has that in hand, it's quite hard. Maybe we can see another Path to Peak Marnie combination, but at this point in the game, the decks are so thinned out that getting 4 useless cards in your hand of a Marnie is not as likely anymore.
Yeah, I don't know what's left in Joe's deck here. I mean, the flying Pikachu blocker at the front with, like you said, a boss to get something from the bench is the best approach, but we know the escape rope is there. which makes it a little bit tougher. I really don't see many options here for Joe, but he might be thinking he knows this deck better than any of us. It's going to be tough for him. Flying Pikachu. Any options there?
I mean, the other option would be, what about Thundershock? Paralyzing the active with a coin flip?
I think that's going to be...
Preventing it from retreating. However, we saw that Peter picked up the escape rope to play around that. But of course, Joe doesn't know that. There's the evolution.
Yeah, there's a lot of things Joe will be thinking about now. Does he have a switch out? Does he have the energy for attachment? Does he have the ability, if I boss something up, even if he's got a boss, that's a whole nother challenge in itself. So Joe, right now, is going to be drawing pretty much all of his deck.
Yes.
In fact, all of his deck here. So there is no extra turn, so he can't deck out next turn. Gets the path down. That will stop the Charizard, but as we know, Charizard isn't the only option here. Joe is trying everything he can to make this as hard as possible for Piotr.
It's quite interesting. Typically, if you draw all your cards and then it's your turn again, you can't draw, you lose the game. However, because it will be Peter's last turn, that won't come into effect. So Joe can risk running out of cards for this turn.
I reckon he did that because he thinks he loves the idea of doing a rare situation, I should imagine, and obviously the smart decision to do here. See everything he has available, and it's now for Piotr to find an option. Gets the Clara, gets the Psychic Energy. That's going to be game. Sableye to knock out the Gardevoir on the bench. What a performance there from Piotr.
Yeah, and you might think like that 10 damage early on the raiding Gardevoir, was that important? You saw exactly how smart it was to place that damage on so that at the end of the game, all you need is a Sableye on your bench, one Psychic Energy, and you can pick it up at any point.
And I'm sure when Joe put that Gardevoir down, he was thinking, I might need to attack with this. I haven't had many options here with the cards. In the end, that was his downfall. It's the classic downfall of an Arceus deck. Benching stuff that you don't need to bench is always an option for cards like Sableye, for Greninja with the Moonlight Shuriken, and for gusting and getting those easier KOs. So unfortunately for Joe, just losing out there on the final turn of the game, which I'm sure after that first turn in Game 3, he'll be thinking, do you know what, I got away with that.
Yeah, Joe, of course, having played on this stage so many times before, will be down like 2-1 now, still in a good position, and I'm sure he will find his composure, come back into this tournament and shake off this loss. But on the other side for Peter, in his home turf, winning in Poland against Joe, amazing.
That's going to be a story he's going to be telling the locals. You know that Omnipoke Joe guy? Yeah, me, I beat him. Piotr, this is a little bit me being a fangirl now. I'm definitely deflecting it into Piotr. He probably doesn't even care. He's probably like, I'll just beat another Pokemon player. But yeah, Piotr, the Polish player, goes on stage, plays Lost Box very well. I think watching him play, he made his decisions well. He looked calm. He took his time, which is a very easy thing to not do when you're playing Lost Box, because you've got so much to do that you think, I've got to rush through it, and that's when mistakes start to happen. But he timed it perfectly, just won there in the final turn, and he's going to be going 3-0 now in the Swiss.
That's a great start. 9 points straight away, 10 points left to advance to day 2. Still a very long way to go. But these wins on stage, I've been there before, winning on stage,
the buzz.
Continuing in the buzz, going to the next round, keeping up that the flight, it's just a really great feeling.
Yeah, I mean, everyone here plays Pokemon because they love playing Pokemon, and what better way to do it on stream, and as you mentioned, the local player doing it on stream. These kind of moments will be ones that they'll cherish for a long time, and I think what we'll see as the tournament goes on, there's rumours of some of these Polish players doing well, so we might see some more Polish players. I've heard about the Polish legend who's doing well as well, so hopefully we get to see them in the future, and we are excited to see the Swiss play out. But for you, is there any decks that you're excited to see on stage? We just saw Lost Box versus Arceus Giratina. That we haven't seen some already.
Yeah, so we saw the Giratina played, but it didn't play as big of a role. It was a second attack in this game. I really want to see Giratina popping off, getting some big KOs, KO after KO against other big VMAX Pokemon or VMAX decks. So I'm interested to see if we see that, maybe even in a Lost Box variation where you also has access to the V-Star attack, another option. So looking forward to seeing more Giratina action for sure.
Yeah, the Star Requiem is brought the big Parasol back, which is a fun little interaction there. And that's the advantage we've got now at the end of a cycle of meta. Last tournament here for the Lost Origin meta everyone knows what's out there, so they're thinking, what can I put in that will be able to punish these other decks? And Big Parasol is a great example of that, of recognizing the Star Requiem's there, trying to punish it, and we saw so many options there in the Lost Box to punish the various decks out there. Charizard, one prize attacker, takes big knockouts. The Snorlax as an anti-Crobat strat. You're never going to want to place a Crobat down when you see a Snorlax on the opponent's side. So a wonderfully built deck there from Piotr to really punish a lot of the meta.
Yeah, I really like the dynamic that TGC has with introducing new sets, giving players the option to be like ahead of the meta game, finding the perfect combination, like the big anticipated Lugia that we talked about for the next set. But then as the set goes on and leading into that like final tournaments, like, hey, now all the tricks are out, how can I counter the meta game? So this constant like first developing metagame, then countering it is like really interesting interaction.
Yeah, I'm going to take a little risk here and talk to chat for a second because it's always risky when you ask them to do something. We've got quite a varied meta right now. I think it's fair to say, you know, when we talk about Lugia in the future and Mew in the past, there is potential for decks to dominate a little bit. But who in chat has got a favorite deck right now? And let us know what it is. We're going to go for a quick break and we'll be looking at those answers, and maybe afterwards we'll talk to Piotr a little bit more about them.
Absolutely.
Welcome back, TCG players. I'm here with... so this was a debate I had in the middle of the game. Is it Piotr or Peter?
Piotr. It's a common thing.
I said Piotr. Barish thought it was Peter. I'm not going to throw him under the bus. I heard, because I spoke to two of your Polish locals. And
yeah, I heard about it.
Yeah, so I was very fortunate to hear all about the Polish scene. But for the people at home, tell them a bit about the Polish TCG scene.
Well, we for a long time we didn't have organized play. So the scene grew, like players were making tournaments for other players. So we have, for example, that long tradition of, I think we had 22 Polish unofficial nationals. So I remember when I played like 12 years ago, there were like 20 or 30 people at these tournaments, but right now, at the last one we had over 100. Or
That's amazing.
Something around this, and now we got our first regional, so that's really amazing to watch this happen.
Yeah, I've heard a lot from the Polish players how much this regional means to you guys, and how much it must mean for you to be on the feature table and to get the win. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, well, I got quite nervous because I misplayed so badly at the start of game 3, because I had the game, basically the donk on Bidoof, but I whiffed it. I mean, I didn't whiff it. I didn't see that vacuum plus stadium bounce was getting me to 4, and then I could switch into Cramorant. So when I then tried to fix that, because I thought I had like one more switching card in my hand, but I didn't, and that got me quite nervous. And I knew the matchup wasn't great because of the flying Pikachu, like in Fiore, but I think he only plays like 2-1 line of it, and I have escape ropes. But yeah, after game 1, I thought I would be happy with a tie. But when he scooped early game 2, because he didn't want to get a tie, and game 3, yeah, I'm happy how it ended.
Yeah, you thought a lot about that whole game. I mean, the whole journey of that game, we were watching it, and we really didn't know where it was going to go, because game 1 was incredibly close. I think had you hit that Charizard at one point, it might have gone differently, and there was a lot for you to find through your Comfey. But you played it so well, and you said you're nervous. We couldn't see it on the stream. You played very smart. And I think from your point of view, what do you think is the single most important thing, now you've been on there, that you're going to tell your Polish friends who are competing in TCG?
Like about stream?
Yeah, like how are you going to recommend they go on stage, and any tips for them to go on stage?
Yeah, I didn't do this well, but just chill and
Just chill.
just focus on the game and don't think what you done wrong before. Yeah, and just enjoy the game.
Enjoy
focus
it.
And
Have fun. Yeah, exactly. And for you, I think this is going to be one of those memories you keep for a while. You know, regional here in Warsaw, and you get the chance to play on stage. And against Joe, I mean, I'm a big fan of Joe.
Oh, yeah,
so
me too.
so seeing you beat him, I was so proud of you to take that win. I believe we've got an interview in a bit. We'll get a chance to meet you, I'm sure, again. I'm sure you're going to keep going and keep winning those rounds.
I'll
but
try.
just before we go to that interview, would you like to say any messages to the people at home?
Yeah, just if you live in a small community and it's not, you don't have big tournaments, just keep going, play the game, and you'll be fine. And I hope other countries like Poland will get their regional and grow the community.
What a beautiful message. I'm going to send it over to the interview now. Make sure you tune in. There's going to be more games coming up later.